Part 1. I'll pay when I can. The restaurant fell silent the moment the girl said those words. I'll pay when I can. Everyone in the room turned to look at her. Some people laughed quietly. Others shook their heads. Because the man sitting across from her wasn't just anyone. He was Victor Langston, a billionaire. A man whose name was printed on half the buildings downtown. The kind of man people tried very hard not to disappoint. And right now, a young girl in a worn sweater had just told him she couldn't pay him back. The waiter froze beside the table. The manager slowly walked closer. And the entire room waited to see what Victor Langston would do. Because men like him were known for many things. Power, money, influence. But patience was not one of them. The girl looked down at her hands. Her voice was quiet. I'm sorry, I didn't realize the bill would be this much. The manager frowned. You ordered the meal. You're responsible for paying. I know, she said softly. But I really will pay. Just not today. A man at the next table chuckled. Yeah, right. Someone else whispered. She shouldn't have come here if she couldn't afford it. The girl's face turned red. But she didn't argue. She just looked at the man sitting across from her. Victor Langston, the millionaire she had accidentally shared a table with earlier that evening, because the restaurant had been full, and the host had politely asked if she could sit at the last open seat. At his table. She hadn't known who he was at first. He had just seemed like a quiet older man enjoying dinner alone. They had talked, laughed, shared stories, until the check arrived, and reality came crashing down. The total bill was more than she earned in a week. Now everyone in the restaurant was watching, waiting. Victor Langston slowly lifted his glass of water, took a sip, then placed it down carefully. The girl braced herself, expecting anger, maybe humiliation. Instead, Victor asked a single calm question. What's your name? She looked up, surprised. Emma. And Emma, he said quietly. Why did you come to a place like this if you knew you couldn't afford it? She swallowed nervously. I didn't know how expensive it was. Then why stay once you saw the menu? Emma hesitated, then gave an answer that made the entire room even quieter. Because this is the first restaurant my mother ever wanted to visit. She talked about it for years. Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. Where is your mother? Emma looked down again. She passed away last year. A long silence followed. Then Emma added softly, I just wanted to see the place she loved. So I ordered the same meal she used to talk about. No one laughed anymore. The room felt different now, but the manager still crossed his arms. Touching story, he said. But the bill still needs to be paid. Victor Langston slowly leaned back in his chair. Then he looked at Emma again. And what he said next made the entire restaurant gasp. Part 2. The Millionaire's Decision. The restaurant waited. Every single person in the room was watching Victor Langston. The billionaire tapped his fingers lightly on the table. Then he looked at the manager. How much is the bill? The manager glanced down at the receipt. $240. A few people in the restaurant whispered. For Victor Langston, that amount was nothing. But the situation wasn't about the money. It was about principle. Emma sat quietly across from him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. I really will pay, she said again. I can come back tomorrow. Or next week. The manager shook his head. That's not how restaurants work. Emma nodded slowly. I understand. She reached into her small purse, pulled out a few bills. $37. That's all I have right now. Someone at another table muttered, "She shouldn't have ordered anything." Emma heard it, but she didn't respond. Victor watched her carefully. Then he asked, "What do you do for work, Emma?" "I work at the hospital cafeteria." "What position?" "I clean tables and help in the kitchen." Victor nodded slowly. "So you work hard?" Emma shrugged. "Most people do." Victor picked up the bill, looked at it for a moment. Then he placed it back on the table. The room grew even quieter, because everyone expected him to say the obvious thing, "I'll cover it." But he didn't. Instead, Victor asked something very different. "If someone helped you today, would you forget about it tomorrow?" Emma looked confused. "No." "What would you do instead?" Emma thought for a moment. Then she answered honestly, "I'd try to repay them." Victor shook his head slightly. "No, not repay. Pass it on." Emma blinked. "What do you mean?" Victor leaned forward slightly. "I'm not interested in people paying me back. I'm interested in what they do after someone helps them." The manager cleared his throat. "Sir, the bill." Victor raised one finger. The manager immediately stopped talking. Then Victor stood up. He picked up the check, signed it, and handed it back to the waiter. Gasps filled the room. Emma looked stunned. "You didn't have to do that," she said quickly. Victor smiled faintly. "Yes, I did, but not for the reason you think." Emma frowned slightly. "What reason?" Victor placed something on the table. A small white business card. "Because this dinner," he said calmly, "was not the real test." Emma stared at the card. It had his name on it. Victor Langston, CEO, Langston Industries. Her eyes widened. "You're—" "Yes," he said simply. "But that's not important." He looked directly at her. "The important part happens tomorrow." Emma looked confused. "Tomorrow?" Victor nodded. "Come to this address at 9 a.m. and bring the $37 you tried to pay tonight." Emma blinked. "Why?" Victor smiled slightly. "Because tomorrow, you're going to decide whether this dinner was just charity or the beginning of something much bigger." The entire restaurant watched as Victor walked toward the exit. Emma sat frozen, still holding the business card. But what she didn't realize yet was that tomorrow morning, Victor Langston was going to test her in a way that would completely change her life. Part 3. The address on the card. Emma barely slept that night. She kept staring at the business card lying on her small kitchen table. Victor Langston. Even after searching his name online, she still couldn't believe it. The man she had shared dinner with was one of the richest people in the city. His companies owned hotels, hospitals, office buildings, and somehow he had asked her to meet him. At 9 a.m., she checked the address again. It wasn't a restaurant. It was the headquarters of Langston Industries. Emma almost decided not to go. "People like him don't invite people like me," she whispered to herself. But something about the way Victor spoke at the restaurant felt genuine. So the next morning, she wore her cleanest clothes, placed the $37 into an envelope, and took the bus across the city. 30 minutes later, she stood outside one of the tallest buildings downtown. Glass walls, security guards, luxury cars pulling up every few minutes. Emma suddenly felt very small, but she forced herself to walk inside. The lobby alone looked more expensive than anything she had ever seen. A receptionist sat behind a large marble desk. Emma approached slowly. "Excuse me," she said nervously. I have a meeting with Mr. Langston." The receptionist raised an eyebrow. "Your name?" "Emma Carter." The receptionist typed something on her computer. Then her expression changed slightly. "Oh, you're expected." Emma blinked. "I am?" "Yes." Floor 27. Emma stepped into the elevator feeling like she had entered another world. When the doors opened, a tall man in a gray suit was already waiting. "Miss Carter?" he asked politely. "Yes. Mr. Langston is waiting for you." Emma followed him down a long hallway lined with glass offices. Every employee they passed looked busy and important. Emma suddenly felt embarrassed about her worn shoes. Finally, the man stopped in front of a large office door. He knocked once, then opened it. Victor Langston was sitting behind a large wooden desk. He looked up and smiled. Right on time. Emma stepped inside nervously. "Good morning." Victor gestured toward a chair. "Please sit." She sat carefully and placed the envelope on the desk. "This is the money I owe you." Victor glanced at the envelope, then gently pushed it back toward her. "I told you yesterday," he said calmly. "I'm not interested in repayment." Emma looked confused. "Then why did you ask me to bring it?" Victor stood up and walked to the window overlooking the city. "Because I wanted to see if you would." Emma didn't know what to say. Victor turned back toward her. "Most people would have taken the free dinner and disappeared. But you came." Emma shrugged. "My mother raised me better than that." Victor nodded slowly. "I suspected she might have." He walked back to the desk and sat down again. "Now," he said, "let's talk about the real reason I asked you here." Emma felt her heart start to race. Victor opened a folder on his desk. Inside were several documents. Then he said something she never expected to hear. "Emma, how would you like a job that could change your entire future?" Emma froze. "What kind of job?" Victor smiled slightly. "The kind where your honesty matters more than your experience." Emma stared at him, still trying to understand what was happening. But the next thing Victor said would shock her even more than the dinner the night before. Part 4. The Job Offer. Emma stared at Victor Langston across the desk, still trying to understand what she had just heard. "A job?" she asked quietly. Victor nodded. "Yes, but I clean tables in a hospital cafeteria," Emma said. "I don't think I'm qualified for anything here." Victor smiled slightly. "That's exactly why you're qualified." Emma frowned, confused. "I don't understand." Victor leaned back in his chair. "For 30 years, I've hired people with impressive resumes, degrees, awards, experience. And do you know what I learned?" Emma shook her head. "Most of them look perfect on paper," Victor said. "But the moment money or power is involved, their character disappears." Emma stayed silent. Victor continued. "Last night, when you couldn't pay your bill, you could have lied. You could have left. You could have made excuses. But you didn't. You told the truth." Emma looked down at the envelope still sitting on the desk. "My mother always said honesty is the one thing no one can take from you." Victor nodded slowly. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." He slid the folder across the desk toward her. Emma opened it carefully. Inside were papers labeled Langston Industries Executive Assistant Program. Emma's eyes widened. "You want me to work here?" Yes. As what? She asked nervously. Victor folded his hands. My personal assistant. Emma almost dropped the folder. Your assistant? Yes. Emma shook her head quickly. I can't do that. Why not? I don't know anything about business. Victor smiled again. That can be taught, but integrity, that's much harder to find. Emma sat quietly thinking. But why me? She asked. There must be thousands of people more qualified. Victor stood and walked toward the window again. You know something interesting about successful companies? Emma waited. They don't fail because of bad strategies. They fail because they trust the wrong people. Victor turned back toward her. And last night, you proved something very important. What? Emma asked. You returned this morning with $37. Even though you knew I didn't need it. Emma didn't know what to say. So yes, Victor said calmly. I want you to work here. Emma looked overwhelmed. But what if I fail? Victor chuckled. Then you'll learn, and learning is never failure. Emma looked at the documents again, then slowly closed the folder. This feels unreal, she whispered. Victor nodded. It probably does. Then he added something that made Emma's heart stop. But there's one more reason I chose you. Emma looked up. What reason? Victor paused for a moment, then said quietly, because last night wasn't an accident. Emma blinked. What do you mean? Victor looked directly at her. That table at the restaurant. I reserved it for someone very specific. Emma felt a chill run through her. Someone specific? Victor nodded slowly. Yes. You? Emma's mind raced. But we met by chance. Victor shook his head. No, that dinner was the first part of a test. And suddenly Emma realized something terrifying. The night before hadn't been random at all. Victor Langston had been watching her long before she ever sat at that table. Part 5. The test she never knew about. Emma stared at Victor Langston in disbelief. You were watching me? She asked slowly. Victor nodded calmly. Yes. Emma felt a strange mix of confusion and nervousness. But why? Victor walked back to his desk and opened another folder. Inside were several photographs. He placed one on the table. Emma leaned forward. Her eyes widened. The photo showed her working in the hospital cafeteria, wiping down tables, helping an elderly woman carry her tray. That was 3 weeks ago, Victor said. Emma looked shocked. You were there? Victor nodded. I visit that hospital often. My company funds several programs there. He slid another photo forward. In this one, Emma was standing outside the hospital entrance, giving a sandwich to a homeless man. Emma's cheeks turned red. I didn't know anyone was watching. That's exactly the point, Victor replied. People behave very differently when they know someone important is watching. Emma slowly leaned back in her chair. So the restaurant was also planned? Victor nodded again. Yes. I asked the host to place you at my table. Emma blinked in shock. That wasn't an accident? No. Victor folded his hands. I wanted to see something. What? How you would behave in an uncomfortable situation. Emma shook her head. You tested me? Yes. And you passed. Emma felt overwhelmed. But why would a billionaire test someone like me? Victor looked out the window for a moment before answering. Because 5 years ago, I trusted the wrong person. Emma listened carefully. My previous assistant, Victor continued, was one of the most qualified people I had ever hired. Top university, perfect resume. But eventually, he stole millions from my company. Emma's eyes widened. Millions? Victor nodded slowly. And do you know what hurt the most? Emma shook her head. I trusted him. Victor looked back at her. So this time, I decided to do things differently. Emma glanced at the photos again. You watched me for weeks. Yes. And the dinner was the final test. Emma sat quietly for a moment. Then she asked something important. What would have happened if I ran away from the restaurant without paying? Victor smiled faintly. Then I would have simply finished my dinner alone. Emma exhaled slowly. So my entire future changed because I stayed honest? Victor shook his head. No, your future changed because that honesty is who you are. Emma looked at the folder again. The job offer. The opportunity. Everything felt unreal. Why do I feel like there's still something you're not telling me? She asked. Victor paused, then slowly opened the last document in the folder. There is one more thing, he said. Emma leaned forward slightly. What is it? Victor turned the paper toward her. At the top it said, Langston Foundation Scholarship Program. Emma frowned. What does this have to do with me? Victor looked directly into her eyes. Because your mother applied to this program years ago. Emma froze. My mother? Yes. And when I read her application, Victor's voice softened. I promised myself that if I ever met her daughter, I would make sure her dream didn't die. Emma felt tears begin to form in her eyes. Because suddenly she understood something incredible. Her mother had once dreamed of an opportunity like this. And somehow, without even knowing it, Emma had just stepped into the future her mother always wanted for her. Part 6. The dream her mother left behind. Emma stared at the document in front of her. Her hands trembled slightly. My mother applied for this? She asked. Victor nodded. Yes. Emma slowly picked up the paper. At the bottom of the page she saw a familiar signature. Maria Carter. Her mother's handwriting. Emma felt her throat tighten. She never told me about this. Victor leaned forward slightly. She applied 10 years ago, but at the time, the program had already selected its candidates. Emma wiped a tear from her eye. My mom always wanted me to go to college, she said quietly. But we never had enough money. Victor listened carefully. She wrote that in her application, he said. Emma looked up. She did? Victor nodded. She wrote that her greatest dream wasn't for herself. It was for her daughter to have opportunities she never had. Emma looked down again. Memories of her mother flooded her mind. Working late shifts. Saving every dollar. Always telling Emma to keep believing in something better. I thought she forgot about that dream, Emma whispered. Victor shook his head. No, she believed in it until the end. Emma wiped another tear. But she died before anything could happen. Victor opened another page in the folder. That's not entirely true. Emma frowned. What do you mean? Victor turned the page toward her. It was a letter, dated only 6 months before her mother passed away. Emma read the first line and froze. To Mr. Victor Langston, if my daughter ever crosses your path, please give her a chance. Emma's eyes widened. She wrote to you? Victor nodded quietly. She sent this letter after learning about the foundation again. Emma continued reading. The letter explained how hard Emma worked, how kind she was, how she always put others before herself. Emma's tears fell onto the page. She believed in me that much? Victor smiled softly. She did. Emma looked up. But how did you find me? Victor leaned back in his chair. The hospital cafeteria. Emma blinked. What about it? Victor pointed to one of the photographs again. 3 months ago, I saw someone helping an elderly patient carry food trays. That person didn't know anyone important was watching. Emma remembered that moment. I was just helping. Victor nodded. That's exactly what your mother described in her letter. Emma's heart pounded. So you started looking for me? Yes. And everything that happened after that, the restaurant, the job offer, the tests, was simply my way of confirming something. Emma took a deep breath. What? Victor smiled. That Maria Carter was absolutely right about her daughter. Emma closed the folder slowly. Her life had changed in ways she couldn't fully understand yet. But one thing suddenly became clear. Her mother's dream had never truly disappeared. It had simply been waiting. For the moment, Emma was ready to step into it. But Victor wasn't finished speaking yet, because the next thing he said would change Emma's future even more than the job offer. Part 7, an offer that changed everything. Emma wiped her eyes and slowly closed the folder. For a moment, the office was completely silent. Outside the tall windows, the city moved like nothing unusual had happened. But inside that room, Emma's entire life had just changed. My mother believed in me that much, she whispered. Victor nodded. She believed in you more than anyone. Emma took a deep breath. I wish she could see this. Victor looked thoughtful. I believe she can. Emma gave a small emotional smile. Then she asked the question that had been building in her mind. So, what happens now? Victor folded his hands on the desk. Now we talk about your future. Emma sat up slightly. My future? Yes. Victor opened the folder again and pulled out another document. This is the Langston Foundation Opportunity Grant. Emma looked at the paper carefully. What does it do? Victor smiled. It pays for your entire college education. Emma froze. Everything? Tuition, books, living expenses. Emma's heart raced. I can actually go to college? Victor nodded. Yes, but there's something else. Emma leaned forward slightly. What? Victor slid another document toward her. This is the employment agreement. Emma blinked. The job you mentioned? Yes. You can work here while studying, as my assistant. Emma couldn't believe what she was hearing. So you're offering me both? Victor nodded. A career opportunity and an education. Emma felt overwhelmed. Why would you do all this for me? Victor looked at her calmly. Because 10 years ago your mother believed someone should. Emma stared at the documents again. 2 opportunities. 2 life-changing choices. But I don't know anything about running a company, she said. You don't need to, Victor replied. You just need to keep being the person you already are. Emma laughed nervously. That sounds easier than it probably is. Victor smiled slightly. It will be difficult, but difficult things often lead to the most meaningful lives. Emma sat quietly for a moment. Then she looked up. What if I fail? Victor leaned forward slightly. Then you'll stand up and try again. That's how every successful person starts. Emma slowly nodded. Then she did something Victor didn't expect. She pushed the papers back across the desk. Victor raised an eyebrow. You don't want them? Emma shook her head gently. I do, but I want to earn them. Victor looked curious. What do you mean? Emma took a deep breath. You watched me for weeks to see who I really was. Victor nodded. Yes. Emma smiled slightly. Then let me prove you made the right choice. Victor studied her carefully. Then he smiled. You already are. But Emma still had no idea that the very next day at the office, something unexpected would happen. Something that would test her honesty in a way even Victor Langston never predicted. Part 8, the first real test. The next morning, Emma arrived at Langston Industries earlier than anyone expected. It was only 7:30 a.m., and most of the offices were still quiet. She had barely slept the night before, not because she was nervous, but because her mind kept replaying everything Victor had told her. Her mother's letter, the scholarship, the job, the chance to build a completely different future. Emma stepped out of the elevator and looked around the huge office floor. The city skyline stretched across the windows. It still felt unreal that this place might become part of her life. Just as she reached Victor's office door, she noticed something strange. The door was slightly open. Inside, two men were talking quietly. Emma recognized one of them immediately. It was Victor Langston. The other man wore an expensive suit and looked slightly impatient. Emma stopped walking. She hadn't meant to overhear anything, but the man's voice was loud. This is a mistake, Victor. Victor remained calm. Why do you say that? Because she's just a cafeteria worker. Emma felt her stomach tighten. The man continued. You're trusting someone with zero experience. Victor didn't raise his voice. I'm trusting someone with something far more valuable than experience. The man shook his head. You're risking the entire company over a personal story. Victor looked directly at him. No, I'm protecting the company from people who only care about money. The man sighed. Look, the board will never approve this. Victor leaned back in his chair. They don't have to. Emma slowly stepped back from the door. She didn't want to listen anymore. But suddenly, Victor's voice called out. Emma, her heart jumped. He had seen her. She slowly stepped into the office. Good morning, she said nervously. Victor smiled. Perfect timing. The other man turned to look at her. His expression was clearly skeptical. Emma, Victor said calmly, this is Daniel Foster, one of our senior board members. Daniel crossed his arms. So you're the girl. Emma nodded politely. Yes, sir. Daniel studied her carefully. You understand that this company manages billions of dollars, right? Yes. And you've never worked in business before? No. Daniel looked back at Victor. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Victor didn't respond. Instead, he turned toward Emma. I have a question for you.
Emma straightened slightly. What is it? Victor placed a small envelope on the desk. Someone left this outside my office this morning. Emma looked at it. What's inside? Victor opened it. Stacks of cash. Thousands of dollars. Emma's eyes widened. Daniel spoke quickly. Someone from accounting probably misplaced it. Victor looked at Emma. Maybe. Then he said something unexpected. But right now, you're the only one here who knows about it. Emma's heart began beating faster. Victor slid the envelope across the desk. Take it. Emma blinked. Take it. Yes. Daniel looked shocked. Victor. Victor raised a hand. Then he looked directly at Emma. No one would know. No cameras. No witnesses. Just you. Emma looked at the money. Then at Victor. Then back at the envelope. And suddenly she realized something important. This wasn't an accident. This was another test. But what she didn't know yet was that the decision she made in the next few seconds would determine whether Victor Langston trusted her with his entire future. Part 9. The Choice. Emma stared at the envelope on Victor Langston's desk. Stacks of cash. More money than she had ever seen in one place. The room was silent. Victor watched her carefully. Daniel Foster stood with his arms crossed, clearly skeptical. Well, Daniel said impatiently. Take it. Emma slowly reached toward the envelope. Daniel smirked slightly, as if he had already predicted the outcome. Victor said nothing. Emma picked up the envelope. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Emma did something unexpected. She closed the envelope, walked around the desk, and placed it back in Victor's hands. I think this belongs in accounting, she said calmly. Daniel frowned. That's it. Emma nodded. Yes. You didn't even count it. Emma shrugged slightly. I don't need to. Daniel laughed quietly. You're telling me you wouldn't be tempted? Emma looked at him honestly. Of course I would. Both men looked surprised. Emma continued. I'm human. But temptation isn't the same thing as making the wrong choice. The room became quiet again. Victor slowly smiled. Daniel shook his head. You could have walked out with $10,000. No one would have known. Emma looked directly at him. But I would have known. Victor leaned back in his chair. That, he said quietly, is exactly the answer I hoped for.
Daniel looked irritated. You're seriously going to trust the company's future to someone like her? Victor nodded. Yes. Daniel pointed toward Emma. She has no degree, no business experience, no connections. Victor smiled slightly. But she has something much rarer. Daniel rolled his eyes. And what's that? Victor looked at Emma. Integrity. Daniel scoffed. Integrity doesn't run corporations. Victor stood up slowly. No, he said calmly. But without it, corporations collapse. Daniel sighed. You're making a mistake. Victor didn't argue. Maybe, but it's a mistake I'm willing to make. Daniel grabbed his briefcase. Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you. He walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back toward Emma. We'll see how long you last. Then he left. The office became quiet again. Emma looked at Victor nervously. I hope I didn't make things worse. Victor chuckled softly. You did the opposite. Emma tilted her head. How? Victor walked back to his desk. Daniel Foster has been trying to convince the board that I make decisions based on emotion. Emma frowned slightly. And do you? Victor smiled. Sometimes. Then he looked at her seriously. But today, I made a decision based on evidence. Emma glanced at the envelope again. So that was really a test. Victor nodded. The final one. Emma took a deep breath. And? Victor extended his hand toward her. Welcome to Langston Industries, Emma Carter. Emma shook his hand slowly, still trying to process everything that had just happened. But Victor wasn't finished yet, because the next thing he said would reveal a surprise that even Emma never expected. And it would prove that the dinner at that restaurant was only the beginning of something far bigger than either of them imagined. Part 10. The Promise Her Mother Made. Emma stood in Victor Langston's office, still holding his hand. "Welcome to Langston Industries, Emma Carter," he said again. For a moment, Emma didn't know what to say. Everything had happened so fast. The restaurant, the tests, the job, the scholarship. Her life had completely changed in less than 48 hours. "I don't know how to thank you," she said quietly. Victor smiled gently. "You already did." Emma looked confused. "How?" "By being exactly the person your mother described." Emma felt a lump form in her throat again. Victor walked toward a cabinet in the corner of the office. He unlocked it and pulled out a small wooden box. "This belongs to you," he said. Emma frowned slightly. "What is it?" Victor placed the box on the desk. "Your mother asked me to give it to you someday." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "She left something for me?" "Yes." Emma slowly opened the box. Inside was a silver necklace with a small heart-shaped pendant. Her eyes filled with tears. "She used to wear this every day," Emma whispered. Victor nodded. "She sent it with a letter." Emma picked up the necklace carefully. There was a small folded note inside the box. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The handwriting was instantly recognizable. Her mother's. Emma began reading. "My dear Emma, if you're reading this, it means you finally met Mr. Langston. And it means you proved something I always knew about you. You are kind, honest, and stronger than you believe. Money can change many things in life, but never let it change your heart. If this opportunity ever comes to you, take it. Not for me, but for the future you deserve. I will always be proud of you. Love, Mom." Emma wiped the tears from her face. "I wish she were here." Victor placed a hand gently on the desk. "She believed in you long before I ever met you." Emma closed the box carefully. "I won't waste this chance." Victor smiled. "I know you won't." Then he added one final thing. "And remember something important." Emma looked up. "What?" "That dinner you couldn't afford might turn out to be the most valuable meal of your life." Emma laughed softly through her tears. "I think it already is." Outside the office windows, the city moved as always. Millions of people chasing opportunities, dreams, second chances. But for Emma Carter, one simple moment of honesty in a restaurant had opened a door she never imagined. And somewhere beyond that door, the future her mother dreamed of was finally waiting.